This is Big Tasty Sports.
Got a great video for you here. Yanni from the Bet Crushers joins me to talk through NFL regular season awards, as well as best record and worst record in the NFL for the upcoming season. What you'll find as we get into it is that there are some good spots where there's quite a bit of line discrepancy on different books, and that opens up some really great opportunities. There's 3 or 4 spots where he and I really agreed, see things the same way, and I think there's some excellent value. I went and placed some bets after recording this video, but that was just yesterday, and you're seeing this today, so those lines should still be there. And if you'd like to join me, feel free to do that. I do want to just throw out, if you are interested in building a futures portfolio, so not just getting these bets here and there, you can follow me at or subscribe at bigtastysports.substack.com. You can subscribe for free, and that way you will make sure that you don't miss any of these videos or write-ups that are coming out right now. Obviously, all futures related. As we get to the season, there will be some week-to-week content as well, and a lot of that will be free. You can also sign up for a paid subscription, just $7 a month. You can get a 7-day free trial. And with that, you're going to get all of the bets that I'm placing. I am sharing more of the tools that I'm using for how I'm making the futures bets, really stacking a portfolio throughout the whole season. So my hope is to, like last season, this turned out to be very lucrative for me. The hope is that it will be again. I always say there are no guarantees, so don't hear me saying that, but I do think the NFL futures markets are ones that can be beat much more so than the week to week. Though I bet those two, because you are going to as well, right? We just try to make some money. So follow me at Big Tasty Sports. My personal is at NBA Attack. You can follow me there as well. Subscribe on bigtastysports.substack.com. And with that, let's bring in Yanni and get into the good stuff. We continue the march toward the NFL season, and we got to find something to talk about. Plus, hopefully some ways to even make a little money months and months from now. So I got Yanni back with me to talk some player awards tonight. How's it going, Yanni?
It's going good, man. This is some of the, I think, most enjoyable stuff to chat about when you talk about futures and betting. Love this stuff. How you doing?
That's good. I'm ready for you to enlighten me, because to be honest, last year the only player bet I made last year, which I don't even remember where I heard it. I heard someone else bring it up when Geno Smith was at like plus 2,500 for comeback player of the year, and that ended up being very good, but I can't even take credit for it. It wasn't even my original thought. So,
well, you know what though? That's why you collaborate. That's why you listen to other people's podcasts. Right. That's why you do all that. Absolutely, right. Man. Yeah.
Yep. Absolutely. Well, I'm excited to talk through this stuff with you. You know, we've been chatting about where some teams stand, and obviously the way teams play is going to play into how some of these awards go too. So we're going to go through a bunch of different awards and kind of talk about who we like and what the numbers are, and we'll see if we come to any bets that we actually like enough to make. I haven't bet any of these things yet, so we'll see. Should we start with MVP or should we end with MVP?
Hey, it's your show, man. I'm just here for the ride.
You're going to make me make all the decisions. All right, let's start. We're going to end with MVP. We're going to start with the one that maybe there will be the least to talk about. We'll see, and that's comeback player of the year. So the last 5 years, 2022, Geno Smith, which I just talked about. If I could hit another 25 plus 2,500, I would love to do that, but I don't think that's happening in this category this year. 2021, Joe Burrow. 2020, Alex Smith. 2019, Ryan Tannehill, and 2018, Andrew Luck. There have been 5 QBs in a row that have won this, and only 4 defensive players ever. But there's a defensive player at minus 250 last time I looked. Or is it still there, or is it something else now?
You know, on DraftKings as of right now, today is the 23rd, it is minus 650.
FanDuel's still at minus 250. So this might be extreme value. So, okay, we're talking about DeMar Hamlin. He's a Bill, so I'll let you go.
Well, you know, first of all, I don't see how you can bet this unless you're doing something like what you just said, which is if DeMar Hamlin's at a minus 650 and you can get it at a minus 250. If he plays this year, and I think that's the big if, I don't see how he doesn't win, right? I mean, first of all, it's not a slam dunk for two reasons. Number one, we don't know for sure if he's going to play. He is at OTAs right now, but he's not practicing. So, there's still a little bit there in terms of, they're saying, well, it's on his schedule and this and that. So we don't know for sure if he's going to play. And here's the other thing. It sounds crazy because he ended up starting 14 games last year, 15 games for the Bills last year. He's not a guarantee to make that roster. They added Taylor Rapp. They brought Jordan Poyer back. Micah Hyde is back from injury. So, he's not a lock to make that roster anyhow. That would be the thing that scares me away from Hamlin is if he doesn't make that roster, is someone else taking a chance on him. That being said, if he plays, how does he not win the award? I just don't see how he doesn't. So I look at this and of all the things that we're going to talk about tonight, this is the one that's not bettable to me. And it's because of that, you've got to either believe that Hamlin's going to play, in which case he should be a shoo-in for that award, or not. And the other part of this is even if you don't like Hamlin in this spot, where do you go? Normally, when you look at this award, there's one or two kind of clear options that you look at and you're like, yeah, it's probably going to be this quarterback, whatever. But there's a lot of guys, and you mentioned 5 quarterbacks in a row, and there's some guys on that list, a Deshaun Watson's out there, people like that. But, there's guys like Cooper Kupp out there. There's a lot of big names out there. So I'm not even sure what direction you go in this one if you didn't want Hamlin. But to me, if Hamlin plays, I don't see how he doesn't get this award. So for me, this is the one that's not bettable. I don't know if you agree.
Yeah, I mean, I like what you're saying there. Honestly, when you said 650 on DraftKings, one of the things that I have been trying to pay attention to is if there's massive line discrepancy, and I think one of them is wrong, that's part of what's moving me to bet things. And so I think Damar Hamlin at minus 250 is not a terrible bet because I think, like you said, if he plays this year, and I mean, I was going to ask you the question, how many games does he have to play? I almost think he just has to play a couple, one. I mean, just to come back and play it all is the story the NFL wants. So I agree. And man, it's hard for me. Maybe he's not good enough to make the roster, but it's almost like, how do the Bills not keep him on the roster for 1 year at least? Let him play in spots, and then maybe they let him go after that. But it's hard for me to imagine them letting him go this year with everything that they went through, and how the Bills supported him and everything. That's hard for me to imagine. So I agree. I think almost the only way he doesn't win it. I was thinking, like, who are they going to give it to? Calvin Ridley. Hey, welcome back from betting on the NFL. We want to give you comeback player of the year.
What happens if he has 2,000 yards receiving this year? What do you do? Right?
Yeah, right. What do they do? Well, and that's the thing is, I think at the end of the day, I don't want to say Damar Hamlin won't deserve it. After what he went through, man, to get an award like that, I can't hate on him for that at all. But in terms of play on the field, he'll deserve it because of the narrative and just the heart to come back. But play on the field, it's probably unlikely that he will. But whoever it is that by their play on the field probably deserves it, probably won't get it. I'm going to just throw out a couple, though. If you thought Damar Hamlin's not going to play or something, or you don't want to go with him, there are a couple places that I was looking that I'll just throw out. One of those is Tua. Again, this is partly narrative driven. He's going to be on a good team in Miami. And honestly, if he can stay healthy and not have more concussions and stuff, I think he makes Miami a really good team. He played pretty well in a lot of spots last year. So I think that's a story that the NFL would like to, almost of like, hey, look at this guy who got all these concussions, but he came back and now he's fine and playing well. So that's one.
That's a great point. And I'll just add to that really quickly. It's probably unlikely that Tua wins MVP, right? Even if he's healthy, he could.
Right.
Again, he could put up big numbers. They could have a great season, but chances are he's probably not going to win MVP. So to your point, do they spread that out and say, okay, Tua had a great year, but not quite the MVP. So let's go ahead and give him this comeback player of the year. Right. So I think sometimes when you look at that, that's another great point. I think you're right on the money with that. They would love to be able to say, yeah, see, concussions, guys can come back. We got this thing. Everyone's healthy. Everyone's good. I mean, absolutely, man. Absolutely.
We took care of him. Yeah.
Yep.
And then the other one, and this gets into way long shot, and he should be a way long shot, but, and some of these other guys would have to get out of the way, is Michael Thomas. Now here's the thing. Michael Thomas every year is going to come back and then he stubs his toe or whatever and he can't play again. So is it likely that he's going to play 16 games? No. Or 17 or, no. Either one. Is it likely that he's going to come back to the form that he used to be where he was a dominant receiver, even if he does play? No. But if he did, and with Derek Carr there, if he had a big year, he's one of the guys that I could see putting up the kind of numbers on the field to potentially put himself in the running. So at plus 8,500, that was just the other one that stuck out to me at a huge number.
Yep. Lottery ticket.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly.
Yep.
Parlay that was something.
There you go.
I don't know what, but go for it. So this is honestly, talking to you about this makes me feel like it is probably something worth paying attention to the news out of Bills camp and trying to pay attention to how DeMar Hamlin's coming along. Because if you could get ahead of the news that even, I mean, honestly, if it even looked like, hey, he's probably not going to play, I would maybe take a little bit of a flyer on someone like Tua. Or if you get the news like, hey, he's playing and you still get a minus 250, then I would probably play that too.
Yeah, you're right. Timing is critical with one like this, because if you can get that story, you could potentially beat the books to that. And like you said, if you find out, hey, it doesn't look like he's going to make this roster, it doesn't look like, it looks like he's going to sit out this season, whatever that is, absolutely, you could jump on someone at that point while you still have a little better value.
Yep.
All
right. Well, let's move on from there let's go to the coach of the year next. So 2022, Brian Daboll last year. Great job by him, I thought. Phenomenal what he did with the Giants last year. 2021, Mike Vrabel. 2020, Kevin Stefanski, proving that anyone can win Coach of the Year. 2019, John Harbaugh. 2018, Matt Nagy, also proving that anyone can win Coach of the Year. So since 1990, only 3 people who have won Coach of the Year have won less than 10 games. Jimmy Johnson in 1990 at 7-9. I should have quizzed you and asked you if you knew which 3 it was.
I wouldn't have known, I don't think.
I wouldn't have known either if I hadn't looked it up. So the other one, and I'd have to go back and look if he took over in the middle of the season or what happened, but Bruce Arians in 2012 went 9-3 as the head coach.
Okay.
So he didn't have enough games. It didn't matter. His winning percentage was way over what 10 wins would have been. And then Brian Daboll was the other one last year who went 9-7-1. So because of that tie, kept him under 10 wins, and he still won it. So I say that just to say that we're probably looking at a coach of a pretty good team who's likely to win this award. Do you have anything sticking out to you on Coach of the Year as you look at the odds that you like?
Yeah, I don't have, I would say this, I don't have a strong feeling on this, but there are a few guys that I would kind of keep my eye on here. Arthur Smith is one. And first of all, I'm not an Arthur Smith fan at all. But I think you look at, this is a team that a lot is dependent upon the quarterback position and what happens there. But if they get decent play, this is a team that plays in a bad division that could win their division. They could hit that, 10 win mark, like you said, potentially. And obviously they weren't great coming in. So you start saying, oh, here's a guy, Arthur Smith, he turned this crappy team around, with that kind of a thing. So, I think you could look at a guy like that. He's around plus 1,600, at least I'm on DraftKings. But, I think you could even go a little bit further down the line there. You got a guy like Mike McDaniel. We just talked about Tua. If you're a believer in the Dolphins, and the Dolphins seem to be one of those polarizing teams heading into the season, you got some people that are very high on them. You got some people that are not high on them. If you're one of those people that believes they're going to have a strong season, I think McDaniel at 22-1 is not the worst bet in the world. He's kind of one of those guys that, he's that trendy hip coach that the players like, and, the media thinks he's quirky and all this stuff. If they were to win the AFC East and, Tua came back and they played well, I think he would be in the mix. And then, you got a couple of veterans, and I think we always hear about the voter fatigue with these guys, but you look at a guy like Pete Carroll. We've been talking a lot about the Seahawks. The Seahawks, in my opinion, are going to be a top 4 team in the NFC, and maybe even top 3. And Carroll's a guy, same kind of thing, right? He's generally a likable guy. If this team does really well, not impossible. Again, it tends to be more those guys like you listed, right? The Stefanskis, the Nagys, these kind of new guys that come in really bad teams and win a few games. So that's why I kind of, said, maybe a guy like Arthur Smith. But I think realistically, when you look at value, you look at more of like a McDaniel or a Tomlin if you want to really truly go for that. But again, I don't have great feelings on these. I think this is a little too much of a crapshoot for me. And granted, any future award is, but I don't like Coach of the Year here. I think there's just a little bit, there's too much subjectability to this, if that makes sense, or objectability, whatever you want to call it.
Yeah, I think I'm in the same boat with you. As I was looking through these and even thinking about things that I would potentially bet, Coach of the Year did feel like a hard one to me. I will give just a couple thoughts on people I like, though. I think I'm with you that this would be unlikely for me to place a bet. But ones that I was looking at, I mean, at first I thought Sean Payton, if he can come in and get Russell Wilson playing decent again. The Broncos were so bad last year, but I think they have a decent defense. They have decent offensive weapons. If Russell Wilson plays okay, they could be a decent team. Then Sean Payton gets the credit because, like, oh, look at this super coach who came in and turned everything around. So, but he's only plus 1,200, right? So I think of those guys at the top of the board. That's the one that I would take. But I wouldn't. I don't hate the Arthur Smith call for sure. And then let me see. I had two others. Okay, so Doug Peterson at plus 2,000. For me, though, again, it's kind of a bet on the Jaguars. I think that they have a chance to be really good, especially in a bad division. And so I think if they end up getting to like 14-3, pushing for even maybe the best record in the AFC because of the division that they play in, I think that could put him in the running for Coach of the Year potentially. And then I like Mike Tomlin at plus 3,000. You and I were talking about the Steelers before we came on here, and if they can compete and win some close games, I could see that. And then the other one that just maybe it's the voter fatigue, like you said. And I'm not going to bet this, but I was just surprised to see Andy Reid all the way at the bottom at plus 5,000.
Yeah.
I mean, the Chiefs, like, if they can be top of the league again, I don't know, why would he be out of the running?
That's what I think makes this difficult is you could make a case for a guy like Andy Reid to be Coach of the Year basically every year. But he's basically crippled by the fact that he has Patrick Mahomes at quarterback. And people look, oh, that's not that hard, right? Patrick Mahomes, I could coach that team to the Super Bowl.
Do it.
Right. So I think you have some of that here. And I think that, my one thing, because I looked at Peterson as well, and I think you hit it. I mean, if for whatever reason they can kind of be a 1 or 2 seed in the AFC type thing, then yes, I think he's in play. But it kind of goes back to what I was saying. I mean, this team made the playoffs and won a playoff game last year. And, it almost, again, favors. It's like this award seems to go to a team that was really bad the year before that someone turns around. So I think your better bet,
Sure,
if you want to wager on this, is figuring out which team that was bad last year do you feel like takes a big step forward and trying to go that. That's why, even though I love a guy like Tomlin or Pete Carroll, I just can't bet them because I think people are going to look and say, they were decent last year. Big deal. These guys are veteran coaches. They know what they're doing. So, it's almost more it's almost more like, hey, the DeMeco Ryans, right? Can he get the Texans to 7 or 8 wins? And then all of a sudden, Ryans took this horrible team that's rebuilding and won these games, but I think, unfortunately, when you look at an award like this, you're not going to see an Andy Reid win it. You're not going to see guys like that get it. It's going to be the DeMeco Ryans of the world, the Arthur Smiths of the world that, kind of turn a team around, so to speak. But to me, that's just, again, you're just kind of subjectively saying which bad team becomes better to where their coach gets some credit here. And I just don't have strong feelings on that.
Yeah, and the ones that you're touching on there, like the Texans, the Lions are sort of in that category, though they obviously had a good end to the season. It does feel like a crapshoot for which one of those teams is enough better to get to a good enough record where they could get that award. So I'm with you. It doesn't feel like something worth betting on to me, and it does feel a lot more subjective. So, all right, we'll move on from Coach of the Year. Nothing there to Offensive Rookie of the Year. 2022, last year it was Garrett Wilson. Now he gets Aaron Rodgers, but he is not a rookie anymore, so he can't win this award. 2021, Jamar Chase. 2020, Justin Herbert. 2019, Kyler Murray. 2018, Saquon Barkley. Since 1990, there have been 17 running backs who won Offensive Rookie of the Year, but only one in the last 5 years. So you wonder, is this the changing league, where it used to be running backs? There have been 9 quarterbacks and 7 wide receivers. So fairly balanced between those two positions. We'll see the difference with this when we get to things like MVP. What do you think here about Offensive Rookie of the Year?
Yeah, I like your breakdown there, and I do think it is a little bit of the changing of the guard. Now, I will say I agree with Bijan Robinson being the favorite to win that award because I think that he's set up so sweetly in Atlanta there, and he seems to be that kind of once every decade type player coming into the draft. I think he should be the favorite, but the odds are so, I mean, he's plus 250 at DraftKings. I don't know what you have, Matt, at FanDuel there, but, there's too many players in the pool for me to do plus 250, even with a guy like Bijan Robinson. So, I'm going to go a little further down there. I want to try a little value if I'm going to place a wager here. And the guy that I really like is JSN, Jackson Smith, Nick,
Jigba.
JSN, Nick Jigba, and JSN. Thank you.
JSN.
Yes. So, first of all, I think he's obviously a talented player coming in. You mentioned Garrett Wilson from Ohio State winning it last year. Most people actually rate Marvin Harrison Jr., Jackson Smith, and Jigba, and then Garrett Wilson and Olave in terms of that receiver room. So he may be as good, if not better, than Garrett Wilson. He's going to get single coverage playing primarily in the slot. I mean, that is a recipe for a lot of catches and a lot of yards for a team that'll probably be pretty good, as we said there. Yes, he's going to lose some targets to Metcalf and Lockett, no doubt about it. But I mean, I think to me, that's going to make him even better because teams are going to be so worried about those two. He's going to get that single coverage with a nickel corner. He's going to be working zones there. I think at plus 800, he's a guy you really got to look at. I mean, he's the type I think is a rookie that could have 1,000 yards and 7 touchdowns. And again, a lot of it will depend on how quickly he gets in and learns, but signs are Pete Carroll loves him. He wants to get him involved immediately. He wants to play him a lot of snaps. So he's a guy you can look at. And then if you want a true long shot, and I hate to be a homer here, but my guy for the Bills, Dalton Kincaid, 35-1. And I can tell you the one thing that would scare me from that bet is Sean McDermott does not play rookies. He doesn't like to put a lot of trust in rookies. So would I be completely shocked if he sees a 20% snap count? No, I'll be disappointed, but I won't be completely shocked. But if he gets on the field, he's the type of guy with a 35-1 payoff. He can make plays in that offense where they're going to throw the ball around. Sure, Diggs is going to see a lot of targets. You got other guys out there. They even have Dawson Knox as technically their number 1 tight end. But in essence, Kincaid is probably going to be their slot guy lining up. They want him to kind of be that Travis Kelce type role there. It's a little bit of a long shot, hence the 35-1. But if you, again, want a long shot, I think he's probably the most talented player that's that far down the list on offensive rookies.
I like it, man. He's the 4th person I have written down at plus 3,500 also. I think the skill set and the role that he could have, what you just said about whether or not he'll play, that is, I hope he does because I think he's got the talent to do a lot, especially in a system like that. So I like that at plus 3,500. So Bijan's plus 300 at FanDuel. I don't think I'll bet it, but I almost like you said, I don't hate that line. Atlanta's going to be run heavy, and I don't think that he'll be the only one running the ball either. That would be one thing is I don't know how many carries he'll get, but he's going to get a chance to do some good things, and I think he'll have a good season most likely unless he gets hurt. But at plus 300, I don't really see much of any value to that. You're basically saying he's going to win it, and exactly what you said. There's too many good players here for me to say that a running back's going to come in and just dominate. Other ones that I had written down, Bryce Young, plus 430. I think Carolina is a hard team to get a read on for sure this year. They've overhauled so much of that roster. Frank Reich coming in. I don't know exactly what it'll look like. I don't know exactly how good Bryce Young is. But out of the first-year quarterbacks, he's the one that I would probably be most high on. And so at plus 430, I just wrote down, like, if you want to bet near the top of the board, I'd probably take him over Bijan at this point, to be honest. But I won't take him either. The other one that I wrote down that's also a long shot along with Dalton Kincaid is Devon Achane in Miami. I think the fact that they drafted him says that they don't think too highly of Mostert and oh my gosh,
Jeff
name
Wilson.
just escaped me. Yeah, Jeff Wilson, right. Even though maybe they're Mike McDaniel's guys or they were or something. But I think he has a lot of talent, actually. I think he showed well in college. And so if he gets opportunity at those long odds, he's in a dynamic or a potentially dynamic offense at least. And so I could see him having a really good season too. This is another one that I think I would probably stay away from, or I might put some on Dalton Kincaid and then see how the first 6-7 games of the season go. And maybe there's another guy that I get decent odds on and end up splitting between a couple players.
Yeah, no, I hear you. I mean, obviously that's a true long shot. I think, when you look at this, I wrote down here, you mentioned the quarterbacks here. There's a very good shot that one of these quarterbacks is going to be pretty good. I mean, just statistically speaking, if you got 3 or 4 rookie quarterbacks, there's a good chance someone's going to emerge from the pack and say, wow, this guy's pretty good. I'm with you. I think Bryce Young is probably that guy. The Colts are saying the right things about Richardson. We'll see. I don't think Stroud's the guy. And I think even if he is, it'll take him a little bit of time to get going. But, how do you know which quarterback is going to emerge? Again, they're playing on 3 not great teams, so you kind of look at that and say, whatever. That's why for me, to you, I'm passing on the quarterbacks. I think the odds on Robinson are just too short. So, again, I'm looking at more of a JSN or, like you said, a long shot play with a guy like Kincaid or someone. And maybe you reevaluate that as the season goes in.
Yeah. And maybe you even with bets like this, sometimes I think maybe you give it a couple weeks too. Like what you were saying with JSN, see how it plays out with him in the slot. Where are they getting the ball most of the time? And it's not like 2 games in, you're going to know what's going to happen the whole season. I mean, these things change. But with some, especially with rookies, I'd like to kind of see what role they have. I mean, with Dalton Kincaid, maybe you see what kind of snap share he's getting. And maybe then he's only plus 3,200, instead of plus 3,500. But it might be worth seeing a little bit of what happens.
Yeah, I agree with you. And, I'll use this example from last year. So last year, the guy who started the season really hot was Jahan Dotson, the first few weeks of the season. Then he missed about half a dozen weeks with, I think, a hamstring or whatever he had that held him out. So obviously that deflated his chance. But when he came back, he was also productive. So to me, that was like, to your point, you saw him the first couple weeks of the season. He looked like he was a part of the offense. He was targeted heavily. He was a red zone target. And had he not gotten hurt, there's a good chance he could have been offensive rookie. You never know what would have happened. So I think it's a good point. You kind of evaluate after a couple of weeks and see a guy like JSN. Is he getting the targets? Is he getting the snap count? Are they looking at him in the red zone? And then you can kind of gauge, regardless of what the statistics say as far as catches, yards, whatever. You can see, though, is Geno Smith looking his way? Does Pete Carroll trust him? Is he on the field on third down? Those kind of things. And then I think, to your point, you can gauge, all right, is this a guy that I could see really having a strong rookie campaign, or is he just going to kind of be a guy? So I think you're right on with that.
Yeah, just to close that out, in some ways you almost want him to not have too good of a first 2 or 3 weeks, but you want to see snap count up. You want to see like target share up, those kind of things. And maybe he's getting a lot of short targets, but over time, maybe they get longer. He breaks more so you see these signs that he could have a big year, but you almost don't want him to start off too hot.
You don't want 160 yards. Yeah, you don't want 160 yards and 3 touchdowns in week 1. Right. I hear
That's
you.
right. That's right.
Yeah.
All right, let's go on to defensive rookie of the year. So here in 2022, Sauce won, cornerback. 2021 was Micah Parsons. 2020, Chase Young. 2019, Nick Bosa. And 2018, Shaq Leonard. I do not have a lot of commentary to give on this one. Do you have anything you like when you look at defensive rookie of the year?
Nothing that I love. And honestly, with the exception, I will say this, if this is a bet that you're looking to make, I think Shaq Leonard is the outlier here, kind of a middle linebacker. He had a great rookie season, definitely deserved to win. But I think that's an anomaly here. I think if you're playing this, you're either playing a pass rusher or you're playing a corner. The corners are tough because that's generally an interception award, right? Whatever rookie has 6 interceptions or 7 interceptions. Rarely do you see a talent like Sauce Gardner where he kind of locked people up from week 1 and whatever. Is it possible that we see another corner like that? Yeah, maybe. But I think it's more about, if you're playing a corner, you're almost guessing and saying which guy's going to pick off a bunch of passes. For me, if I am going to play this, I'm going to take the quote unquote safe route and try to pick a pass rusher here. That's the most quantifiable way to win defensive rookie of the year, right? Is build up a lot of sacks, get a lot of credit for celebrating, taking the quarterback down. Now, I don't love Will Anderson just because, kind of like Bijan Robinson, there's just not a ton of value there. Is he a guy that's probably going to get you 8 or 10 sacks? Probably. But at that value number, there's nothing there. I think Tyree Wilson is just as capable and you get better odds. So I think if you're looking there, but I think the guy that I know when you watch the draft, and I think that for whatever it's worth, I think it was Todd McShay that was really high on him. It might've been Kuiper. I don't remember. One of the two. They really liked Lucas Van Ness. And that's a guy that I think he kind of fits that mold of what the NFL likes to highlight. He's kind of that TJ Watt, Nick Bosa type player, right? He's kind of that fast yet rugged defensive end linebacker type hybrid guy that can get after the quarterback. He's playing in a kind of a historic market there where I think he's going to have a chance to make some plays. He's around 15-1, at least on DraftKings there. Do I love it? No, because I don't know enough about him or these guys at this point to really make a strong statement. But I think, again, if I'm betting this, I'm trying to find a pass rusher that I think has the most quote unquote value. And for me, it's a guy like that.
Yeah, that sounds good to me. I can't say that this is my strongest, especially the defensive rookies. The two that I had written down were Joey Porter Jr., which I do think he went a little late. I think they're also, to me, part of that is there's the story aspect there. If he goes to the Steelers, playing where his dad did. So, and it's plus 3,000. So, and I think he actually is a good player, and I think he will get playing time. But to your point, it's an interception award. The other one, but the other one for me, I'm getting ahead of myself, is Kalijah Cansey in Tampa Bay. But it's probably such a bad team that I don't know that you want to bet on anyone on that team for any kind of award. Yeah. And so I think he has some talent. And again, at plus 3,000, I wouldn't mind him if he was in a better situation. But
yeah, you're right about the situation. And I also know, I know enough about him to know that I don't know that he's what does Dick Vitale call him? A stat sheet stuffer, right? I mean, he's a guy, he could be a great player. He could end up having a great impact, but I mean, is he going to be that guy that shows up where, he ended up with 13 sacks? Or he doesn't strike me as that type of player. I think he's more do the dirty work, get in there, make some plays. And that to me is what would scare me away from that. Is he could end up being the best defensive rookie. Very clearly could happen. But is he going to have the stats that people are going to look at and say he's the guy? That's what worries me with a guy like that.
Yep. All right, let's move on to things that I feel like I know more about.
Sure.
Although that was the one I feel like that and Coach of the Year. I'm probably not betting anything in those categories. So let's move on to, we're going to go Defensive Player of the Year first, then Offensive, then MVP. So Defensive Player of the Year, last 5 years, 2022 was Nick Bosa, 2021 TJ Watt, 2020 Aaron Donald, 2019 Stephon Gilmore, 2018 Aaron Donald, and I'm pretty sure 2017 was Aaron Donald too. So for a while there, it was the Aaron Donald Award.
Yep.
And to your point, stuffing stat sheets and being incredibly dominant. So since 1990, there have been 15 defensive linemen, 12 linebackers, and 7 defensive backs. With defensive line, I did smash together. Like now they're calling Nick Bosa an edge player, which means outside linebacker / pass rusher. I put those guys from the last couple of years on the defensive line because I feel like they're playing a rushing position a lot of the time. And honestly, it's just to look back at history. It doesn't matter very much for now. So Defensive Player of the Year, is there anything you like there this year?
So I think that for me, the top 4 are all in play, meaning, who do you like best between Parsons, TJ Watt, Bosa? I think Sauce Gardner, again, if he gets the stats, I think he's kind of earned that early, whatever. He could be that guy. But I don't, for me, I don't have a strong preference between guys like Watt and Bosa and Garrett, right? They all kind of produce. They all kind of do the same. Again, a little bit of a team award. So I'm going to do something a little bit different with this one here. I'm going to go with a second-year player, Kayvon Thibodeau. He's at 55-1. And, he came on at I don't know, week 9 or 10 last year, and he looked every bit as dominant as those guys that we just mentioned, Watt and Bosa and Garrett. So can he duplicate that? I'm not sure. But what I know is if you're telling me that TJ Watt's plus 800 or whatever number you're getting there, and Thibodeau is plus 5,500, you're telling me to me that, and I know that this isn't real math, so please don't judge me on this, but you're telling me that tells me that you think TJ Watt is 7 times better or more likely to win this award. And please don't, I know I'm not using real math here, but to me, that's the way I'm looking at it. When I look at the value, I think that Thibodeau is potentially maybe not quite as good as those big four, right? Maybe not quite that good, but I don't think he's that far behind them. And when you look at going all the way from a plus 800 or a plus 900 or that kind of a thing, all the way to 55-1, give me a shot at that. I'll take a shot at that, hope that maybe this guy racks up 18, 19 sacks and, we'll see how it goes. But I like that better than flipping a coin between Watt and Garrett and Bosa and Parsons and seeing what happens there.
Yeah, so what I'm going to start with is if I have to pick one of the guys at the top, and I agree, all 4 of those guys at the top, if they stay healthy, are likely to have great seasons. So how do you pick between them? I would take Myles Garrett right now, and a lot of it goes to what we were talking about before we started, which is that Zadarius Smith joined the Browns now. I think that's going to free up some space for Garrett to work. And so the amount of damage that guy can cause is significant. So if I have to pick a guy from the top, that's who I'm picking, but I'm not going to bet him. I actually think I am going to get to a bet here too. The next person that I have written down that I'm interested in is Aiden Hutchinson with the Lions. I felt like he had a really strong finish to the year and got to that level where he almost felt unstoppable at times. And that's the kind of guys that I want to look. All 4 of those guys at the top have those games, right? So I want to look for other guys that are going to have those kind of games. And I think to your point about cornerbacks, it being an interception game, I absolutely think there are numerous cornerbacks on this list who are in play, but I kind of don't want to bet on them because they have to get the interceptions. Like if they're just breaking up passes, if they're so good that they're taking away the other team's number 1 receiver and they just don't ever throw to them, then they're not getting opportunities. Yep. And so I don't really want to bet a cornerback. And so I like Aiden Hutchinson at plus 3,000, but I think the bet I'm going to get to is Kayvon Thibodeau. I had him written down too. Same thing for me. And I know that this is not like maybe data driven, but that guy at the end of the year was like, get rid of the ball fast because you don't have a chance with this guy. He's going to be in the backfield. And just like you said, to see him at 55-1 when Aiden Hutchinson is 30-1 and these other guys are, plus 700, plus 800, to me is pretty wild because he's a young player too. And so if anything, he's likely getting better, not like getting over the hill in his career or something. And so I think that with Daboll as his coach, I like him to continue to be dominant this year if he can stay healthy. So I think this is the first one where I might be getting to at least a small bet at 55-1. I mean, you take a little flyer, it's not going to kill you. And I will say, I actually think he's more than a flyer. I think he has a legitimate opportunity to be in the running to win that award.
I do too. And that's the thing is, to me, this one isn't a lottery ticket. I mean, I think this has a legitimate chance to happen, meaning, if this happened, I'm not going to be shocked. I would be like, oh my gosh, I can't believe he won. It could happen. And I will say I also have, to your point, I had Hutchinson jotted down as well. Kind of a similar reason to Thibodeau. The only reason I mentioned Thibodeau was again, the better odds there because they should probably, in my opinion, be similar on those odds. That's kind of why I went with Thibodeau, but I agree. Hutchinson, I think, is very much in play here as well. If you want those. So if you're willing to get past the Garrett, Watt, Parsons, Bosa deal there, to me, those are definitely the angles that I'm going.
Yep. I love it, man. I like getting to the first. There's a couple others I'll think about, but the first one that I'm like, okay, I think when we're done here, I'm going to get a little something on that one. So,
yep.
All right, let's see if we have any more. Next up is Offensive Player of the Year. Oh, let me flip back to my notes side, not my who I might want to bet side. 2022 was the Jet, Justin Jefferson. 2021, Cooper Kupp. 2020, King Henry. 2019, Michael Thomas. See, there's Michael Thomas. Remember, he was good at one point. So 2018 was Patrick Mahomes. Since 1990, there have been 12 quarterbacks, 17 running backs, and 4 wide receivers. But 3 of those 4 wide receivers were in the last 4 years. So again, when we talk about this potential shift in the NFL of just how the game is played and stuff, it's a shorter sample size, but I think we have to consider that it might be that wide receivers are going to win this award more frequently now than they used to, and maybe running backs less frequently than they used to. So what are you looking at for Offensive Player of the Year?
First off, you bring up a great point there, and I think that we see, obviously, we know it's almost a guarantee that MVP is going to go to a quarterback. I mean, it's almost a foregone conclusion. So when you see guys like this last year, Jefferson or Kupp the year before, that have such amazing seasons, but it's like, well, we can't give him an MVP because he's a wide receiver. I mean, it's almost like that's the way they feel. So what do? They're like, we'll give you the runner-up consolation prize. You could be Offensive Player of the Year, that kind of a thing. So I think you're right. I mean, I think this award is less likely to be a quarterback moving forward. I mean, not impossible. Again, maybe you have a guy like Tua, who you mentioned, who has a great year, but he's not MVP. So maybe, he gets up. Not impossible. But I think you're right. I think that this is probably a wide receiver driven award, maybe a running back award, but I think you have to have one of those really special seasons out there, which is ironic for me to say, because I'm going to give you a couple running backs on this list here that I'm going to give you. But I'm going to tell you my first pick, if I'm picking this award, is I'm going with Tyreek Hill. You can get him anywhere. I've seen plus 2,300, out there, 23-1. So I think that there's a decent number on Hill. And here's the thing with Hill. He's got the type of, as you know, speed and playmaking ability that if he stays healthy, a decent quarterback stays healthy, he's guaranteed to have a big season. It's just how big. And we saw how fast he started last year before Tua started getting hurt and, and those kind of things, and teams kind of adjusted a little bit. But I mean, he was on pace to go over 2,000 yards. He was absolutely racking it up. And I think he's the guy that has the best option, maybe besides Jefferson, to do that again. I think he absolutely can do that. So again, meaning for me, this is more of a wide receiver type award. I'm looking at a guy like Hill. I think he's going to have a big season. He's a guy at, like I said, plus 2,000, plus 2,300 that you can really look at there. Now, I mentioned 2 running backs. If you are tempted by that, and I guess I should say this too, running back is also scary because who tends to get hurt the most, right? Running backs.
Yep.
So, I look at a guy, I mean, Christian McCaffrey, with what he did in his half season there in San Francisco, was pretty amazing. And you got to figure, we don't know how well they're going to be able to throw the ball right out of the gate. We don't know who's going to be playing quarterback. We don't know what's going on. I would imagine that McCaffrey has another kind of heavy workload there. So he's an option there, but there's some durability questions, and I don't think the odds are enough for me. Right now, he's at plus 1,400, at least on DraftKings. That's not quite enough for me. If I wanted to take a flyer on a running back, and again, we're kind of going value, the guy that I'm looking at is Tony Pollard. The reason's pretty simple here. We know Pollard is a pretty dynamic, electric running back. He can put up yards. He can put up stats. Obviously, Ezekiel Elliott's not there. He's going to be kind of the featured guy this year. And we think, or at least I think, Dallas is going to be in the playoffs, most likely, or at least in the playoff hunt. So 45-1 for a guy of Pollard's talent, again, to me, not the worst bet in the world. Now, the one thing I don't know is a lot of times we see these really good, quote unquote, number 2 running backs who transition into that lead role, and it doesn't always translate. Sometimes they go in and they find out, hey, when I'm not the change of pace guy and everybody's keying on me and, all this, they don't do quite as well. So, I'd be a little worried about that. But again, 45-1, that's kind of my long shot guy I'm looking at for Offensive Player of the Year. So I've got kind of Tyreek Hill as the, I guess, legitimate wager here for Offensive Player of the Year. And then Pollard would be my long shot guy that I'm looking at 45-1.
All right. I like it. I mean, Pollard, we talked about this the last time that we recorded a video. I'm concerned about Pollard staying healthy, but he certainly is dynamic. So I like, if he can stay healthy, I like that. I think he's going to be a feature, he and CeeDee Lamb in that offense. So I have a number of them that I'm going to run through here, and I have a number of long shots. You can tell me which are the most crazy. Apparently, I got carried away with long shots on this one. I do like Justin Jefferson kind of, but to win it back to back and also at plus 1400. Again, it's sort of like the last one. I'll pass just because of the number, even though I certainly think he's in play. We'll see how that offensive line can hold up. So I'm going to skip down to plus 4,000. I'm on Ross St. Brown at plus 4,000. I like this is another guy that until he got hurt was just a beast. I mean, he almost seemed unstoppable, like Cooper Kupp-ish. And Jared Goff has played well enough. They've continued to add some talent on that team. And so, I mean, does he keep his target share up? But if he does, and the Lions win the North and they live up to some of their potential, I think he's going to be a big part of the reason why. And I could see him going off with some massive stats.
Let me stop you real quick. So just FYI, he's plus 2,500 on DraftKings. So if you're seeing plus 4,000, again, talk about some value there. If you can shop these around, that kind of goes to show you where DraftKings feels St. Brown's value is. So, if you're seeing plus 4,000,
that makes me more interested.
Well, and to be honest, I was interested in St. Brown. I just thought the number was a little too soft there, meaning I wanted to see more of like a plus 3,000, 3,500. So, I mean, if you're seeing it 4 there, I mean, I think there's obviously some pretty nice value in that.
Yep. I just double checked and it's still plus 4,000. So hopefully it is when people hear this, but so I like that. I got 4 super long shots. Well, the last one I don't even really want to say, but I might just throw it out just for fun. But so the next one is, would he be allowed to win an award with the narrative? But Calvin Ridley is plus 12,000. This is a guy that I think can have a massive year. I think he's going to come back with a chip on his shoulder. I think Trevor Lawrence is a good quarterback. I was looking at some of his numbers here recently from college and then into the pros. I think that Jaguars team is going to be good. And they've got Christian Kirk. They've got, I think, enough weapons that it's not just like the Calvin Ridley show where he's got to carry the whole thing and the defenses can key on him. So at plus 12,000, I think this is a guy that can have the kind of year that wins you an MVP. Thoughts on that one?
No, I think Ridley is set up for a nice year for sure. What we don't know is, like you said, what's the narrative behind this? I mean, unless he just absolutely goes crazy,
right?
Are they going to be willing? Let's say he's close with some of these other guys. Would that be enough? I mean, I feel like the challenge you'd have with Ridley is he'd have to outpace these guys so far to win that award, and that's asking a lot. Now, again, with those odds, though, I mean, hey, there's worse things at those odds you could bet for sure.
Maybe I'll play 50 cents to win $60.
There you go. There you go. Put that old elementary school milk money on there, and
that's right. It doesn't hurt too much when it doesn't happen. So
there you go.
I'm actually the next one I wrote down at plus my math is escaping me. 20,000 was Michael Thomas, similar to what I talked about with comeback player of the year in that offense. If he could return to even something anywhere near his old form, those odds just seemed very wide to me. Their 50 cents gets you $100. So, and then I actually want to hear your take on this because I'm this is an area where I would just say, like, I actually haven't done enough research to know what the standing is right now between Najee Harris and then Warren in Pittsburgh. Like, does it seem like it's going to be a split? Do you know kind of what the running back situation is going to be between those two?
Yeah, I don't know for sure. I mean, they seem to lean on Harris quite a bit. Now, he had some injury trouble,
right.
And I know there were some things there, but I think they lean on him quite a bit. And I think he's an interesting name as well. They've bolstered their offensive line a little bit. I mean, I got to assume that, Pickett's going to garner a little more respect as far as the passing game goes, which should kind of free things up a little bit for Harris. I mean, he's a guy that I think you could definitely, I just did my Chris Collinsworth. Here's a guy. I think, but no, I mean, I do think that Harris is the type of guy that you could look at and say, I could see him having one of those kind of, and he's had good seasons, his 2 years, but I think he's the kind of player though, that he could have that breakout season if their offensive line is better, which it should be. If the defense is a little better, which it should be, he could be that guy that has 1,300 yards rushing, 600 yards receiving, bunch of touchdowns, whatever. It's possible. So I hear you with that. I mean, when you look again at his odds compared to some of the other backs out there, whoever that is, a Jonathan Taylor or a McCaffrey we mentioned, I mean, those odds are way far down, right?
Yep. What is he on DraftKings?
He is, let me see.
Because he's plus 20,000 on FanDuel.
Where is he here? Oh, hang on. I'm
somewhere near the bottom.
Yeah. All right. Where did we see him? Here. See, he's only plus 5,000.
Oh my gosh.
I
think I'm putting a little something on that.
Yeah. So again,
20,000.
Yeah, you're seeing the difference in perceived value, but I mean, we're not saying that DraftKings is sharper than FanDuel here, but one of them is obviously way off. So obviously, if that's a bet you like and you can get that high number, there you go.
Yep. And I know this is an interesting, and aside just on betting in general that I've been thinking about lately, because I have been working with implied probabilities a lot, and the higher you get in the odds, the smaller the gaps in implied probability. Like the implied probability between plus 5,000 and plus 20,000 isn't as big as you think it would be. I'd have to go do the math. Right. But that said, it still is a big difference in payout. I mean, if I bet $100, the difference in payout is $15,000. I mean, that's not a small amount. So I think you have to, it's not just implied probability is what I'm saying. Like the payout matters too.
That was kind of my point with Thibodeau there is like, the implied probability difference between say a guy like him and TJ Watt versus the payout. I mean, it's
right.
It doesn't add up. Right. Yeah. So there you go.
Totally, man. So here's the thing. I did also write down J.K. Dobbins at plus 20,000 for similar reasons. What's he on DraftKings?
7,500.
So again, like if you like any of these guys, go grab them on FanDuel because that payout is huge. And between the two, I think I like Najee Harris more because I think he's younger. They're likely to rely on him more. And the other weapon, like I don't expect Pickett to run as much as Lamar Jackson would say. But J.K. Dobbins, this is for another podcast, but Bet the Board is a podcast I listen to some, and they have a guy who specializes in sports medicine on there and how long it takes people to come back. And in one of their offseason podcasts, he was talking about how J.K. Dobbins, the type of injury he has, when players usually come back, but how long it usually takes them to get back to 100%. And he basically said it was by like the end of last season, or I don't remember he was basically saying by this season, we should see what he can be again. Like it's not, he wouldn't have been expecting him to show what 100% was before. Yeah. And so if he can come back and be 100% with some of the other weapons they've added, I think he's going to have some opportunity. So
he is, I think, again, I noticed him as well. I think he's due for a really good year because of exactly what you just said. My only concern is when you look at the Ravens historically, even when they have a quote unquote feature back, you just tend to see a lot of Gus Edwards and Justice Hill and all these other guys. And it's like before Dobbins' injury, you would see, his rookie year, you would see Dobbins playing well. And then it's like, oh, Gus Edwards is in for the next two series and, Justice Hill. And it's like, what are we doing? But I mean, I think Harbaugh likes that committee, whatever. That's my only concern with a guy like Dobbins is he, even if he has a great year, which I do think he's in line to have a really good year, is he going to get enough touches? Is he going to see the ball enough that he could make that happen? That's my concern with him.
Yeah, I agree. And even for getting TDs, it's like if I think about the Steelers getting down near the goal line, maybe there's some throws to tight ends, to Freiermuth or stuff like that. But I think Najee Harris gets the ball a lot of the time, probably, where J.K. Dobbins doesn't necessarily, I don't think. It could be read option. I mean, they've got some receiving options there now. So, all right. I'm going to say, because no one's listening yet, this is a recording, but I think I'm going to put some on Najee Harris. That line is just too wide. And then I like Amon-Ra St. Brown at plus 4,000 on FanDuel as well. And I like your Pollard call as well. I think those are all valuable for their chances to win, I would say. So, all right. Well, let's move on to the last category here. We're to MVP, or the last category for players at least. On MVP, 2022 Mahomes, 2021 Rodgers, 2020 Rodgers. F you, Rodgers. 2019, Lamar. 2018, Mahomes. The last non-QB to win was the beloved Adrian Peterson in 2012, who could not be tackled at that point in his career. And no wide receiver has won this award. So it is not a wide receiver award, or historically has not been. When you look at MVP, is Josh Allen taking it home?
Man, I'd like to believe so. I can't, I'm not going to bet him. I think that, first of all, I would love that, obviously, if that happened.
Of course.
And he has a legitimate shot. I mean, he could put up good
He's
numbers.
favored. So
Right. He's right there at the top with Mahomes. So, I think that you could look at that. But again, when you're talking about playing against the field, I think you've got to look for some better odds, unless you are just smack dab believing that this is the guy, whatever. I'd like to go just a tad bit better on the odds for a couple reasons here. And I've got really two guys that I'm looking at here seriously. The first is,
I have two, so we'll see if we match on any, because
okay,
I have for MVP as well.
We might with one. I don't know. We'll see. My first is Jalen Hurts. So, I think when you look at Hurts, this guy, when you look what he did down the stretch, it's like the light bulb went out. The light bulb went on, excuse me. He found out how to become a leader. He obviously is in a great situation in terms of the weapons and talent around him. This team should be really good again. And we saw the stats that he puts up, both throwing and running. So the stats, I think, are going to be there. The wins are going to be there for the team. And I think he's now a little bit more of a credible household name, right? Last year was kind of like, he's this athletic guy that's in a good situation. But I think that narrative's kind of changed now to where he's a guy. So if he can duplicate and improve even on what he did a year ago, I think he's got a good chance. I mean, this is a team that should win 12 games, when you kind of look at their schedule, give or take. So I'm looking at him. You can get him plus 1,000, a little better odds than, say, Mahomes or Allen there. And I think he just has a little bit easier road.
1,200 on FanDuel too.
Yeah, there you go. So even better there. And then, the other guy that I'm looking at here, which we talked about a little bit already, and that's Trevor Lawrence. He's in DraftKings. I'm curious now what he is on FanDuel, but he's 14-1 on DraftKings right now. I think this is the year where Lawrence really takes that step. Anything to me less than at least contending for an MVP for Lawrence is a disappointment to me, because he's at a point now where he's got the experience. He's got a really good supporting cast around him. He's got good coaching now around him, and he's kind of proven he can get a team to the playoffs. And oh, by the way, he's got 6 games in the division that he should absolutely light up some defenses with. So, I look at Lawrence and I see those odds, and I think, why should he, again, we kind of go back, it seems like we have the same conversation, but why should he be double what Patrick Mahomes is right now to get MVP, other than the fact that, okay, it's Patrick Mahomes, I get it. But I look at that, I think, again, when you're talking about bang for your buck, Lawrence to me is the guy that I'm looking at and saying he's got a legitimate shot to win this award, and the payout's pretty nice. So those are really the two guys that I'm looking at.
Sweet. So Trevor Lawrence is 16-1 on FanDuel, so slightly better. And he is one of the two that I was looking at. So we're definitely on the same page with Trevor Lawrence. I think that's something I probably do bet. I got to figure out how much. But I like what you said of anything less than contending for an MVP is a disappointment. I do think that with the schedule they have, with the weapons he has around him. And one of the things I've just been impressed by, I mean, you probably remember this, but him coming out of Clemson into the league, he was like the second coming of the Messiah, was the way he was looked at. And I think that people got off of him a little. I mean, and I'll say even me, I'm not going to just point at everyone else. I did this a little bit too, where it was like, oh man, is this guy a bust? Like, he's not playing the way that I thought he would. He's making some really crappy throws, not making good decisions. I think not everybody has it anymore, but there can be growing pains for a quarterback. And he showed, I thought, last year, more of what we expected him to be coming out. And if he can be more like what we expected when he was coming out of college, then he is a top tier NFL quarterback. He also gets Calvin Ridley. He has more weapons now. It is another season under his belt. So you've said a lot of it already, but I just would say, like, I feel pretty strongly that of this top group of people, he's the best value to me of the ones that are there.
Yeah, and if you think about it too, a lot of this award, let's be honest, it's a little bit about marketability, right? And you look at a guy
Yeah.
like Rodgers, Mahomes, these guys are kind of faces of the league, so to speak. And Lawrence is one of those 6 or 7, 8 guys that he falls into that. He's on Subway commercials. He's got the distinguishable long hair. He was the number 1 pick. So I mean, he fits a lot. He checks a lot of those boxes. So if he takes that step, like we said, if the Jags have a top 1 or 2 seed in the AFC, which is not impossible, you start looking at that. I mean, if he's putting up good stats with guys like Ridley and Kirk, and he could absolutely he should be in that discussion. And again, I think at those odds, to me, that's the biggest bang for your buck.
Yep. Agreed. And I definitely don't hate the Jalen Hurts pick. I think the only thing for me with the Eagles, I mean, the NFC is softer, so I don't worry about them too much. I mean, I already have quite a few bets on them to win their division, to go over some win totals. Their schedule's a little tough, and the travel's a little tough. So I could see them dropping a few games maybe they shouldn't. I think they'll still be fine. But that would be my only concern with Hurts. But I agree about him taking another step forward. And that team is just so strong overall that he's in a great situation to have a great year. The other one that I was looking at, but I think actually with us talking through it, I think my primary bet here is going to be Trevor Lawrence. And I'm probably not going to spread it out too much beyond him. But the other one I was looking at was Lamar Jackson at 15-1. We talked about the Ravens the last time we talked. I personally feel very good about what they've added in the offseason. Hopefully Lamar's bought back in completely with the new contract and is completely healthy. We talked about J.K. Dobbins being back and maybe being back to form. So I think Lamar is going to have the opportunity to have a really big year. But, I think it's more that I feel pretty good about the Ravens. And as we were talking about earlier, they're in such a tough division that what if they end up losing a lot of close games? What if he makes some key turnovers that lose them some of those games, which he certainly could do? He can also make some great stuff happen and win a game for him. But I think he feels more volatile to me, where Trevor Lawrence feels more solid.
I would echo that 100%.
All right, I like it, man. Okay, we're going to do 2 other things that are not player awards real quick here. We're going to talk who's going to have the best record and who's going to have the worst record. Let's start with the best record and save worst for last. So what do you think when you look at the odds for best record in the NFL this season?
Well, obviously we've mentioned the Jaguars. I think that, they have a shot just based on the division they play in, that they realistically should sweep and win 6 games right there. So, I mean, you got to look at a team like that. But I mean, I'm going to go to the NFC for a team with the best record because it's the NFC. When you look at the good teams in the AFC, whether that's the Bengals, the Ravens, the Bills, the Chiefs, they're going to beat up on each other. And it's hard to see any of those teams just really winning all of those games, right? I mean, could the Chiefs, could the Bengals, of course they could win all those games, but I just think the AFC is going to be just too much of a gauntlet for a team to get through with a great 14-3 type record, whatever the best record is. I'm going to go back to the NFC, and I'm going to say that the 2 favorites there to me, the Eagles and the Niners, I think have that shot. Now the Niners have, I think, a very favorable schedule. So I think when you look at them, you could make an argument there. Now, my concern is the quarterback position. We don't know kind of where we're at with the quarterback at this point. But if any team has proven that they can kind of win with, I guess if you want to call it mediocre quarterback play, whatever you want to call it, it's San Francisco. So when I look at their schedule, they should win a lot of games. And then, the Eagles, you mentioned down the stretch, their schedule is tougher, much tougher than it was a year ago, right? They're not going to have that cakewalk that they had a year ago. But I also think this team is as good, if not better, than it was a year ago. I still think that, they're, in my opinion, at least if not team 1 in the NFC, team 1A, they're certainly right there. So, I mean, I'm looking at those teams. And if you want a long shot, we talked about them before, the Seahawks, with the exception of their 2 games against the Niners, they should sweep their division, right? If they could split with the Niners. And then they don't have the worst schedule in the world either. So you start looking at that and saying, if this team truly improves both offensively and defensively, which I expect them to, could they be one of those sneaky teams that it's like, whoa, we're at week 12 and Seattle's 9-2, or what. I mean, to me, that's a possibility if you want more of a long shot. But if it's me and I'm betting that, I'm either going San Fran or Philly.
Yeah. And they are plus 3,500 on
Mm-hmm.
FanDuel, the Seahawks. I'm betting some stuff on the Seahawks, but it's not going to be this. Only for the same reason we talked about earlier. I do think at plus 3,500 in comparison to some of the other teams, that's not bad. It's just I don't think it's going to happen.
Right.
So
yeah, it's unlikely.
So I won't bet it. No, but I like that. So for me, I'm with you on Jacksonville. I think we're both just pretty high on Jacksonville this year, and part of it is that I think they're going to be really good, but part of it is the division they play in again. And you talked about this. If you're going to pick a team from the AFC to possibly have the best record, why not go with the one that's going to have the chance to sweep their division? Because I don't think most
should sweep their division.
Should sweep their division. Even in the AFC West, I wouldn't say even the Chiefs should sweep their division. Like, I think it's likely they lose a couple games in the division. And so I think if you're going AFC, Jacksonville's the way to go. I don't know if I'll bet them, but mostly because I've bet a lot of other stuff on them, very heavy on them to win the division and stuff like that. So I just don't know if I'm going to add more. But AFC, I like that. NFC, I agree with you about the Eagles and Niners. I would probably lean I don't know. Yeah, I don't know, man.
It's 1-1A with that. I know.
Yeah, it's a toss-up to me. The other one I was looking at as a long shot, and this is, again, trying to consider the division that they play in and stuff, is the Lions. I think it's possible. I'm not betting anything on the NFC North right now because I feel pretty unsure about that division in general. But I think it's possible that the other three teams in that division are like mediocre to bad this year, and Detroit is like just above mediocre, like on the positive side of that. And in the NFC with their schedule, like one of the things I do in my projections is look at what I think the ceiling is for each team. And I've got them with just a game behind Philadelphia for what I think their ceiling is. Now that doesn't mean I think they're going to get there, but just potential at plus 2,400 or whatever. I don't think I'll bet it, but that's the other team I was looking at.
No, that's interesting. And I think you're right. To me, that NFC North is the biggest question mark division out of the league. I don't know for sure what your Vikings are going to give us. I have no idea what to do with Green Bay at this point. I really don't. I mean,
flip them off mostly. Yeah, just flip them off.
I know you want to do that. Yeah. For me, you mentioned a floor and a ceiling. To me, Green Bay, that floor is really low. That ceiling's really high. I mean, I think it could go a lot of ways, obviously, depending upon what Jordan Love does. But, there's that. And then there's some people that are high on the Bears. I'm not. I don't like Justin Fields. I'm not a Bears guy. But who knows? I mean, maybe Fields does become this incredibly dynamic player who learns how to throw in addition to run. And, maybe those additions they made in the offseason, maybe they go 11-6. Who knows? I don't know. But that, to me, that uncertainty in that division is why I can't get on the Lions here. Not because you're right. I think that the Lions are rightly another trendy team for the second year in a row, because remember, they were trendy going into last year. But I think it's rightly so. I think it's deserved. I think this team has done a really nice job building some pieces. Obviously, they bought into what their coach does. But I kind of look at that and I'm like, okay, even in that division, I look at like the NFC West with San Francisco or the NFC East with Philly. The NFC East is a good division. I mean, the Cowboys are a solid team. I think the Giants are, an improving solid team. Washington is a solid team, but none of them are great in my opinion, right? So it's like, would I be shocked if a team like Philly sweeps the division? No. Will they do that? Probably not. They'll probably trip up at, one or two of those games. But
probably Washington.
Probably.
I mean, the other stuff and then trip up to Washington at home or something.
Probably something like that. But I mean, realistically, though, they could sweep that division. And same thing when you look at the Niners. I mean, they're, they'll probably have a tough game against the Seahawks, but they should be able to handle the Rams. They should, not have trouble with Arizona. So that's why I can't quite get behind the Lions in the NFC. I just think that, even with, like you said, a winnable division and that, I can't see them. I can't see them being that 14-3 team. I mean, could they be that 11-6? Maybe even if things go really well, maybe a 12-5. Yeah, maybe, but I just don't see them kind of having that best record type thing.
Yeah, agreed. I think given the lines, the Jags make the most sense to me. I mean, with at least on FanDuel, with Philly at plus 800 and the Jags at plus 1600, I mean,
Right. I agree.
I don't think there's that much of a separation between those two in terms of their chances. So
Agree completely.
all right. Well, hey, let's end with a barn burner, which is the worst record. I don't know how much of a conversation this will be. How do you feel about the Arizona Cardinals?
Well, sometimes that team that you expect, I mean, whatever, we don't know what's going to happen, but gosh, how could you not pick the Arizona Cardinals here? And yes, I understand that the Texans probably aren't going to be very good. And I mean, there's other teams we can look at. The Tampa Bay Buccaneers are probably not going to be great. I mean, there's some teams that are maybe going to be fighting for that spot, but I don't see how you don't go with Arizona here. I think their defense is going to be absolutely atrocious. I mean, this is a team that whoever's playing them the first couple weeks of the season, I'll be taking their team total over because I think this Arizona defense is really, really bad. When you look at that, and then obviously you flip to the offensive side of the ball, they haven't fully addressed their offensive line, which continues to be a problem. And then you look at the fact that Kyler Murray, and now it looks like even Colt McCoy is not going to be starting the season healthy. Who are
I
they?
hadn't heard that.
Yeah. So who are they putting back there at quarterback? So now you got a defense that's probably not going to be able to stop anybody. I don't even know who's going to be playing quarterback for the first however many weeks of the season. I don't see
Wentz.
Who knows, right? I mean, who knows?
Bring him back.
Right. Who knows? So you look at that and then you say, okay, we talk about a team like the Jags saying they should sweep or could sweep their division. It's kind of the opposite for Arizona, right? I mean, okay, could they beat the Rams? Yeah. I mean, it certainly could happen. I mean, and all it takes is an injury to Kupp and Stafford and, the Ram, whatever. But it's very possible to me Arizona goes 1-5 or 0-6 in their division. And then you start looking around and saying, well, how many other games can they win? And you don't really see any on the schedule that you're like, oh yeah, they'll win that one. So it's almost like, yeah, we know they're going to pick off a win here or there. They're going to get a team sleepwalking at home and pull out a win. I mean, it's going to happen, but to me, I look at that and I'm like, I don't see how they don't finish in the cellar this year. I think this team is in full 2024 building mode where they're going to have a number one pick and they're going to, kind of build from there. And I mean, I'm not convinced. I have a feeling that this team is going to cut DeAndre Hopkins in a week here once he's, his roster, whatever is due June 1st. I wouldn't be surprised if, maybe even they only have a few other veterans on that roster, but I wouldn't be surprised if a guy like Isaiah Simmons gets released, or traded, that kind of a thing. So I'm looking at this team and saying they are not in it to win it right now. They don't have the talent, and we don't even know who's going to be playing quarterback at this point. So give me Arizona all day long here.
I totally agree. So the only thing that I'm figuring out at this point, because I've spent a lot of time, I actually had numerous teams written down, and I was trying to make these mental cases for why a lot of different teams could end up in this spot. I mean, I do just have to throw out that the Packers are plus 4,000, and they might not be very good, but I still don't think we can put them that low. I'm just trying to figure out for sure how I want to bet this team to suck. It's not whether they're going to suck or not. So to your point, when I look at my season projections, and you had said they definitely could get swept in division, what games could they win? I code the games that I think like they have a chance versus ones I think they're going to lose. They're at Washington week 1, but like you said, they're not going to have a quarterback, and they're at Washington. Their chances to win that game aren't good. They're at the Rams in week 6. The Rams might still be good enough that they're still trying in week 6. By later in the season, that might not be the case. They have Atlanta at home in week 10, which I think Atlanta's going to be decent, but that's one of those games. It's like, okay, Atlanta's probably not dominant. They go to Houston in week 11, maybe a winnable game. Maybe. I think Houston's going to kind of be okay this year. So it's not a gimme.
Well, and usually, traditionally suck versus suck, the home team usually wins. So, the fact that it's in Houston. Yeah.
And then the other one is they have the Rams at home in week 12. Maybe the Rams aren't really trying by then.
Right.
So I would actually say that I have one game that I think is like a coin flip, and that's the Rams at home. Every other game, I think they're going to lose. And like you said, I think the front office is probably like, great, let's just go lose them all. Let's get Caleb Williams. We'll be done with Kyler. I don't know if that's their plan, but the draft is better next year or supposedly. So plus 350, The biggest threat I see is the Rams. And the way that I see them being a threat is that Kupp, Stafford, Donald get hurt in the first 4 weeks and they don't win any games there. And then they just have pretty much nobody left. And so they go into tank mode too. I think that's the danger. Other than that, it's hard for me to see how someone else ends up there.
Well, you're right. And let's also talk about the fact that the Rams, once you get past Stafford, Kupp, and Donald, they don't have a whole lot of heck of talent on that team.
For sure. They don't. That's what I'm saying.
Yeah. So even with those three, it's hard to know how good, like, let's say Stafford, Kupp, and Donald are healthy all year. How good are they even with those three? I mean, are they that great even with them? Probably not.
Right.
So you're right on that. I mean, I think that is potentially a threat. And that's funny because I actually thought about the Rams as well. The one thing that steered me away from them, though, is you look, and in the NFL, we know coaching matters. And we saw Sean McVay had that team competitive and even winning a couple games that he had no business being in, right? I mean, once Kupp and Stafford and Donald and those guys were out, that lineup they were putting out there was abysmal. And he had them not only competitive, I mean, they were competitive in almost every game without their stars. I think they had, I don't remember which game they got blown out, but for the most part, they were in those games and they even won a couple of them. So I kind of look at that. And to me, that was the difference between the Rams and the Cardinals is you got a proven guy like McVay. You do have some big name players on that team. So would I be shocked if the Rams end up 6-11? Fine. No. But again, I'm looking to your point with a team like the Cardinals and saying they're probably 3-14. I mean, 4-13, that kind of a thing. So
I think 3 or 4 is generous, to be honest. Yeah. And I know that in the NFL, anything happens, blah, 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 whatever. But I think this is one of those years where this is a really bad team. It's hard to look at where they're going to win games.
And if they do offload a guy like Hopkins and, a guy like Isaiah Simmons, which, that's where the chatter is, right now you could look and say, okay, they got Hopkins, they got Hollywood Brown, they got Connor, they got a few nice pieces. If they offload a couple of those guys, all of a sudden this goes to one of the worst rosters that I mean, you could literally say, it's one of the worst rosters we've seen in the last decade if those guys get offloaded. Because I mean, literally at that point, you're looking at that and saying, who could do anything on either side of the ball? I mean, they don't have really anything on defense. And, offensively, the one thing you can point to is, they got a guy like Hopkins. They got, but I mean, if they don't have guys like that, what are they going to do?
Yep. So I'm gonna give out 2 other potential ways to bet this, and we got to think numbers, right? Because plus 350 for worst record. So one of the things I'm going to give you is not nearly as good of a line, but under 4.5 wins is still minus 110 on FanDuel. And I haven't looked elsewhere, but to me, 5 is the absolute max. Mm-hmm. And I have a hard time seeing them get there. So under 4.5 at even money to me seems like a pretty solid bet. And I hadn't made that yet, but I might think about doing that instead because it certainly feels safer. It guards against the Rams or whoever really tanking. Though plus 350 is not bad. The other one, and this is out there, not saying I would bet it, but just something to think about. The Cardinals to win 0 games is plus 2,300, and to win 1 game is plus 1,100. So if you think they're going to be really bad, there's some large lines out there. To me, that's such an exact thing that I'm unlikely to bet that at all. But I think they could be that bad, though. I think they could be fighting to win 1 game.
No, I agree with you. And again, depending upon what happens at the quarterback position, I mean, we don't know throughout the season who's going to be taking snaps there. I mean, you'd like to think that if Murray can come back at some point during the season, or obviously at least if Colt McCoy's out there at some point, you'd like to think they'd be competitive, but we don't know if those guys are going to play. And, even if they do, I mean, we're talking about Colt McCoy and recovering Kyler Murray. So it's not like we're talking about Dan Marino out there anyways, but I hear you, man. I hear you.
All right. Well, we can at least agree that we don't think the Cardinals will be good.
I don't think from
there and how you want to.
I don't know anybody outside of Scottsdale, Arizona, that's going to argue that point. I mean, Yeah.
Awesome, man. Well, hey, we're gonna get out of here, but before we do that, and I'm just curious because we haven't talked about this. What are things looking like for you in terms of when you start to ramp up more of your content and sort of your approach? I know we're a ways away from the season yet, but what does that look like for you?
Yeah, good question. So I'm kind of working on some things now, but generally what I do is, I kind of take a little bit of a methodical approach, meaning I'm working on division previews right now, but I generally don't put those out until, kind of right before the season. Obviously, we kind of mentioned there's still some player things that are going on out there. And I really like to deep dive as much as I can into each team and kind of look at, schedules and different things like that. So I'll have stuff coming out sporadically really throughout June and July in terms of, I usually put out a couple fantasy football articles. Sometimes I'll put out some future articles, things like this. But realistically, about 2 weeks before the season starts is when I'll kind of go heavy in as far as daily or, weekly type articles that go out there. But I'm already working hard, man. It's going to be I think it's going to be a really, really interesting NFL season. I mean, I think when you look at the way a conference like the AFC is stacked, it's going to be a fun season. So I think the key is, obviously you're trying now to get ahead of you're basically trying to get ahead of things, which is what we're trying to do here. And I think now is the time to do that. So even though from a content standpoint, people like myself and maybe we're a little slower on the content, I think that now is really the time when you can kind of craft your strategy, do your research, get your bets in that you like before they move, those kind of things. So I'm looking forward to it.
Yep, 100%. So go to betcrushers.com, the website, and Yanni and JJ have not just football there, but baseball, NASCAR, all kinds of different stuff. You can follow at Yanni_bet. Also follow at the Bet Crushers on Twitter, and all of those places are where you can get this content as it comes out, or check my retweets also, because it'll definitely be there as well. So Yanni, always fun to kick around some NFL with you. Thanks for taking over an hour to kick these things around.
It was good stuff, man. I appreciate you having me on. I'm looking forward to doing more.
Absolutely. I'll see you later.
All right, take care.